Everybody already knows, platformers, anthropomorphic animals. This combo just goes together so well, it's like peanut butter and jelly. Every developer was jumping on this opportunity back in the day. We all know, though, there had to have been at least 100 throwaway games with furry little characters in them. But some of the big ones were, of course, Spyro, Crash, and Sonic. Now imagine you're a kid when these characters are still amazing. You turn on the TV to see your Saturday morning cartoons, back when they still had those, and you see a commercial with these characters you love so much. In a hospital, on hospital beds, full-body cast, breathing tubes, impaled by boomerangs of all things. That's pretty weird. You see this new guy with the boomerangs, turns around, the other characters get scared. If you wanted a kid's attention, that was the way to do it. And regardless of the actual game that came out of it, you gotta admit, that commercial is hella ambitious. So as you can tell by the title of the video, this is Ty the Tasmanian tiger. A resident from down under in Australia uses his boomerangs to solve his problems. Ty is just one of those games that nobody ever really talks about anymore, which is really a shame, so that's why I'm going to do a video on it. Let's get this platforming Australian stereotype festa going. Many years ago, a battle raged on between a family of boomerang-trained Tasmanian tigers and a cassowary. A bird by the name of Boss Cass in a freakishly large robot monkey suit. Cass wants to steal these magical medallions, but the Tasmanian tigers can't have that, so they use their boomerangs against this huge robot. And it works! Sure. Cass then uses the remote control to slam where the medallions are, and then boom! Vortex! The family, their boomerangs, and absolutely nothing else gets sucked in, because that makes sense. And this story is told to the only one left in the family, Ty. So it's a typical you are the chosen one scenario, which you conveniently find out when you fall down a hole while playing tag with your friends and meet with this ghostly bunyip elder. Now if you couldn't tell, the story doesn't make a single lick of sense. Everything is just so convenient to play out the way it did, Luckily it doesn't really matter, as this is not a platformer that needs a compelling story. But later on, you do find out that there's another mysterious Tasmanian tiger, so you're not the only one. Now who is it? You have to play the game to find out. Alright, it's not really spoiler material, but the story's giving me nothing else to work on. Give me a break. Firstly, let me put an age-old annoyance to rest. No, this is not a clone of Super Mario 64, and I'll take a bet that most of those other platformers that many others call clones aren't of the sort. But anyway, if anything, I'll draw comparisons to Banjo-Kazooie. A good handful of big sandbox-type levels with a bunch of things to collect, which then reward you with even more things. There are 9 main levels, not counting the few linear final levels and boss levels, and in each level you'll find 300 colored opals and a family of 5 caged bilbies. Collecting all of each nets you 2 of a level's 8 Thunder Eggs, which are the game's main collectible, 10 golden cogs and invisible boxes containing pictures for a photo gallery, both of which I'll bring up again later, and lastly 25 rainbow scales in the overworld Rainbow Cliffs, which just helps towards 100%. As for those last 6 of a level's Thunder Eggs, there's one for doing a ring-based race against the clock or another character like this dude bro you catch up to a few times.
Let's you and me race, brah. Betcha, Thunder Egg, you can't beat me.
One for just finishing the level, and the other 4 for just doing typical mission affair like mini bosses, mini games, catching a turkey that stole one of them, typical. And like many other platformers of the sort, it's all about exploration, so it could take anywhere from a half hour to an hour plus to find everything in a level, leading to those lovely moments of, where the hell is that last insert collectible here? We all know that feeling. It may be playing it a bit safe by not trying anything radically different, but when you have tons of platformers that try and fail miserably, it's nice to have one that stays in the boundaries but knows what it's doing. Now what has Ty stick out from the rest of the furry video game character world is the obvious Australian influence, and it's by no means subtle. All the characters, whether they be Ty, his friends, or the enemies, are animals indigenous to Australia. The professor is a koala, the love interest is a dingo, and the enemies consist of frill lizards, kangaroos, rhino beetles, and even better, they all have Australian accents and they use Australian lingo, so you're bound to learn some new terms.
You little ripper, you fair dinkum beat me. I've trained you well, mate.
That in and of itself is one of the reasons why Ty stands out from all the rest. And if you couldn't tell, of course the almighty Australian stereotype is present. Your main attack is your dual boomerangs, which you chuck at enemies. And for close combat, and I'm pretty sure this is not a stereotype. You bite your enemies to death. You can even use your boomerangs to glide to better land your jumps. He doesn't really flap them to get air, he just sort of puts his arms out and he glides. Video games. Instead of getting new moves throughout the game, which is a staple of most 3D platformers, you get different boomerangs instead. There's the Flamerang, Frostyrang, and Zappyrang that do elemental damage that you get for beating bosses, and going to Professor Julius's hut in Rainbow Cliffs with 15 golden cogs in hand nets you one of 6 Techno-Rangs. The Zoom-Rang lets you snipe enemies, fairly useless. The Infra-Rang lets you know where invisible boxes are, which really just seems like a cheap idea for a challenge, but okay. The Multi-Rang lets you throw like 15 at a time, which is ridiculous, but awesome. The Mega Rang locks in on enemies and hits multiple targets with one throw, which is easily the best, no competition. The Kaboomerang explodes. That's it, but what would a good game be without some explosions? And lastly, there are the Chrono Rangs, which slow down whatever you hit, which is cool, but they do no damage to whatever you hit, effectively making the most expensive boomerang in the game the most useless. Thank you, game. I appreciate that. The Australian setting goes into more than just the characters. All the levels are based in natural environments with really nothing crazy going on. Rainforests, snowy mountains, underwater reefs, these are all just real-life settings thrown together to be levels, and I'm okay with that. Not every platformer needs level gimmicks up the wazoo, and for being a game on consoles nearly 2 generations ago, I think the game still looks pretty nice. The atmosphere leaks over to the soundtrack too. There are didgeridoos everywhere, I tell you, everywhere. But the music itself is actually really catchy and it's a surprisingly good soundtrack all around. For what was just a random 3D platformer in the midst of everything else, it has a really well done soundtrack, like really good. Just listen to the track 2 Up, Slide Race, or Snow Worries, and you'll get hooked, believe me. So overall what we have here is a game that may be a bit bare bones, but really does have everything it takes to be a good 3D platformer. You have solid controls, you get rewarded for exploring by getting a bunch of collectibles, you have a main character with a pretty cool character design and an amusing group of friends, good settings with a really good soundtrack, an annoying camera, and a pointless story. I mean, come on, it's all there. But you can call it being a bit repetitive, or you can call it being a bit uninspired, you can call it whatever you want, it just lacks that special something to make it incredible like Banjo-Kazooie, leaving Ty to just be above average. So of course that means the game is not bad, it's quite the opposite. If you're a fan of 3D platformers looking for something new, go right ahead and give this one a shot. It goes for about $10 online, so I doubt you can be too disappointed. The game did end up doing well enough to give us 2 sequels, both of which are completely different than this game, but that's for another time. So for the first Ty the Tasmanian Tiger, I'll give it a... You know what, screw it, forget the number system. If you made it this far into the video, you already kinda know what I think, so I don't need to attach a number to it. Think it's a good idea to get rid of that system. But that's that. Hopefully you enjoyed the review, and as always, I'll catch y'all next time. Good day.
Kids these days, computers, internet, mobile phones, it drives you mad. This is it, the wide open outback. What a glorious view! Lots of sand, red earth and rock, and some more sand, and another rock, and more... Yes, it's glorious, all right.